This is a true life story. Someone shared it with me so I could share it with all of you. The owner of this story hopes it will inspire, educate, and help others learn valuable lessons. She would love to hear your views and the lessons you take away from it. She'll be in the comment section reading your comments, so don't hold back. Your thoughts matter. Before we dive into the story, I want to warn you, grab a tissue paper. This story is deeply emotional and you're going to cry a lot. It's heartbreaking, raw, and a true reflection of real-life struggles. Please note that the names and visuals used in this video are not real. They've been changed to protect the privacy of the people involved. Listen closely to the end, reflect deeply, and don't forget to share your thoughts at the end. Now, let's begin. Years ago, Maria was married to a good man named Daniel, Lena's father. Daniel loved Maria and worked hard to take care of their family. But one day, Maria made a terrible mistake. She cheated on Daniel with a man named Martins. Maria thought it was just a harmless fling, something Daniel would never find out about. But secrets have a way of coming out. One evening, her husband, Daniel, was supposed to be out of town for a business trip, and she thought she had the house to herself. She had made plans to see Martins, the man she had been secretly seeing for months. Martins was charming and always knew how to make her feel special, something she felt had been missing in her marriage. That evening, Maria put Lena to bed early. With her daughter asleep, she felt safe inviting Martins over. They shared a bottle of wine, laughing softly in the dim light of the living room before heading upstairs to the bedroom. Maria didn't know that Daniel's trip had not gone as planned. He had missed his flight due to a delay at the airport and decided to head home rather than wait until the next day. It was late when he arrived, the house quiet and dark. Daniel walked in quietly, not wanting to wake Maria or Lena. But as he reached the bottom of the stairs, he noticed something strange. 2 wine glasses on the table and a man's jacket draped over the back of a chair. His heart sank and his mind raced. Who could it be? He walked upstairs, his footsteps slow and deliberate, dreading what he might find. As he approached the bedroom, he heard muffled voices and laughter. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest as he opened the door. And there they were. Maria and Martins, in bed together. Maria gasped, pulling the blanket up to cover herself. "Daniel!" she cried, her face pale with shock. Martins scrambled to grab his clothes, stammering, I didn't know." "Get out!" Daniel roared, his voice shaking with anger. Martins grabbed his jacket and fled, leaving Maria and Daniel alone in the room. "How could you do this, Maria?" Daniel demanded, his voice breaking. "After everything I've done for you, after everything we've built together?" Maria sat on the edge of the bed, tears streaming down her face. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." "You didn't mean for it to happen," he shouted. "You brought him into our home, into our bed. How long has this been going on?" Maria couldn't look him in the eye. "A few months," she admitted quietly. Daniel shook his head, his hands trembling. "You've destroyed this family, Maria. I trusted you and you've thrown it all away." The next morning, Daniel packed his things and left. "I'll send someone for the rest of my stuff," he said coldly. "You've made your choice, Maria. Don't ever contact me again." Maria begged him to stay, but her words fell on deaf ears. She watched him walk out the door, the weight of her betrayal crashing down on her. From that day forward, Maria was left to pick up the pieces of her life alone. Maria had to raise Lena on her own. She worked hard to provide for her daughter, but deep down, she carried the weight of her regret. She promised herself that if she ever got another chance at love, she would never make the same mistake again. Maria spent most of her days working hard as a cleaner at the community center. Life wasn't easy, but she kept going for Lena's sake. She rarely stopped to think about her own happiness until one rainy afternoon when a small act of kindness changed everything. Maria was struggling to move a heavy bucket of water when she heard a warm voice behind her. "Need some help with that?" She turned around and saw David, a man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Maria hesitated, then smiled. "Thanks, but I've got it," she said. David chuckled. "You sure? You look like you could use a break." Maria laughed softly, something she hadn't done in a long time. "Well, if you insist," she said, stepping aside as David lifted the bucket with ease. He was a handyman at the community center and had just finished fixing a broken shelf in the kitchen. Over time, David and Maria started crossing paths more often at work. David always seemed to have a cheerful attitude, even when he was working late or carrying heavy tools. Maria noticed how kind he was, not just to her, but to everyone around him. Slowly, they started talking more during their lunch breaks. One day, as they chatted during a lunch break, David shared his story. He told Maria that he didn't have much family, he had grown up in foster care, and that he spent most of his time working to make a better life for himself. Maria also found herself opening up to him about her struggles as a single mum. She even told him about the mistakes she had made in her past. "I hurt someone who trusted me," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I don't think I deserve another chance." David looked at her with compassion. "Maria, we've all made mistakes. What matters is what you do with the chance you have now." His words gave her hope, and she began to look forward to their conversations. David wasn't just kind, he made her feel seen, like she was more than her mistakes. On weekends, David often stopped by Maria's house with thoughtful gifts, a loaf of fresh bread, some vegetables from the market, or a small pack of chocolates for Lena. "You two deserve to be spoiled sometimes," he would say with a smile. Maria admired his thoughtfulness, especially since she knew David didn't have much money to spare. One evening, David showed up at Maria's house with a bag of groceries. "I thought you and Lena could use a little extra," he said. Lena, curious about this new visitor, peeked out from behind the door. David knelt down and smiled. "You must be Lena. Your mum talks about you all the time. I hear you're great at math." Lena smiled shyly and nodded. Over time, she began to warm up to David. He helped her with her homework, fixed the wobbly chairs in the kitchen, and even taught her how to repair her bike. Lena started to see him as the father figure she had always missed. Lena, at first, was cautious about David. She loved her mum and didn't want to see her get hurt again. But David had a way of breaking down walls with his kindness. One day, Lena came home with tears in her eyes. "What's wrong?" Maria asked, concerned. "Some kids at school said I don't have a real family because I don't have a dad," Lena sobbed. David knelt down beside her and said gently, "Family isn't about who's there at the beginning, Lena. It's about who shows up and stays. And I'm here for you, if you'll let me be." From that moment on, Lena started calling him Uncle David, and their bond grew stronger every day. As the months passed, Maria couldn't deny that David had become a steady presence in their lives. He didn't just care for her, he cared for Lena as if she were his own. She realized how much better life felt with David around. She believed she had finally found someone who could love her and her daughter unconditionally. One crisp autumn evening, David invited Maria and Lena to the park for a picnic. Under a canopy of golden leaves, he turned to Maria and said, "I've been thinking about this for a long time. Maria, I know I don't have much, but I care about you and Lena. I'm not rich, but I'll do my best to take care of you and Lena. Would you let me be part of your family? I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Maria. Will you marry me?" Maria's heart raced. For years, she had carried the guilt of her past, believing she didn't deserve happiness. But looking at David, She saw a chance for a fresh start. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "Yes, David, I will." Lena clapped excitedly, hugging them both. Months after marrying David, Maria's life seemed to be falling into place. They moved into a small but cozy house, and David worked tirelessly to provide for the family. Maria found herself smiling more, and Lena felt safe and happy with David as a father figure. She felt grateful to have found someone as kind and hard-working as David. He adored Lena and treated Maria with love and respect. Yet, deep inside, Maria still battled her insecurities. One afternoon, as she walked through the bustling local market, Maria heard a familiar voice behind her. "Maria?" She turned around and froze. It was Martin's, her former lover. He looked the same as she remembered, charming and confident, with that sly grin that had once made her feel alive. "Martins," she said, her voice shaky. "What are you doing here?" "I just moved back to town," he replied. "It's been a while, hasn't it?" Maria felt her heart racing. She nodded. "Yes, a long time." They exchanged small talk, but Maria couldn't ignore the way Martins looked at her. It was the same way he used to look at her when they were together. As she turned to leave, Martins touched her arm gently. "It's good to see you, Maria. I've missed you." Those words lingered in her mind long after she returned home. Over the next few weeks, Martins began reaching out to Maria, calling her and sending messages. At first, she ignored him, determined to focus on her marriage. But the more he persisted, the harder it became to resist. One day, Martins asked to meet her for coffee. "Just as friends," he said. "We can catch up. Nothing more." Maria hesitated but eventually agreed, telling herself it was harmless. During their meeting, Martins brought up old memories, making Maria laugh and reminding her of the excitement she once felt with him. "You deserve to be happy, Maria," he said, leaning in slightly. "Are you really happy now?" Maria didn't answer. She couldn't. It didn't take long before their meetings became more frequent. What started as coffee turned into secret rendezvous. Maria knew it was wrong, but the thrill of being with Martins was intoxicating. She told herself that David would never find out, and she convinced herself that no one was getting hurt. Maria became more distant at home. David noticed the change, but chalked it up to stress. "Are you okay?" he asked one evening. "You've been so quiet lately." "I'm fine," Maria replied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But guilt began to eat away at her. She knew she was betraying the man who had given her and Lena a second chance. Despite this, she couldn't bring herself to end things with Martins. One evening, while David was working late, Maria met Martins at his apartment. She didn't know that David had finished his shift early and decided to surprise her at home. When he arrived to find the house empty, he grew concerned. He called her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Suspicious, David drove around town, checking places he thought Maria might be. As he passed by a small apartment complex, he saw her car parked outside. Something inside him snapped. David waited in his car, and after an hour, he saw Maria walking out with Martins. The sight of them together confirmed his worst fears. Maria walked into the house that night to find David sitting in the dark, his hands clasped tightly. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice calm but cold. Maria froze, her heart pounding. I was out," she stammered. "Don't lie to me, Maria," David said, standing up. I saw you with him." Maria's face turned pale. "David, I can explain." "Explain!" David shouted, his voice rising. "You promised me a fresh start. I gave you everything I had, and this is how you repay me? With him?" Maria burst into tears. "I'm sorry, David. I didn't mean for this to happen." David laughed bitterly. "That's what you said last time, isn't it? You didn't mean for it to happen, but you keep doing it, Maria. Why? Why would you throw away everything we've built?" Maria couldn't answer. She knew there was no excuse. From that night on, things between them were never the same. David became distant, his love for Maria turning into resentment. He stayed, but only for Lena's sake. Or so Maria thought. 3 months later, Maria began feeling sick, tired, feverish, and weak. She thought it was just stress or the flu. But when her symptoms didn't go away, she went to the doctor. The news hit her like a storm. Maria had contracted HIV. She was devastated. She knew it had to be from Martin's, and she was terrified to tell David. She convinced herself that if she ignored it, everything would be fine. As time passed, Maria's health worsened, and David began to notice. "Maria, you're always tired. Are you okay?" he asked one night, his voice filled with concern. "I'm fine," Maria lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired from work." But David wasn't convinced. One day, while cleaning up, he found a piece of paper tucked into Maria's bag. It was a doctor's report with the words HIV positive written clearly at the top. David felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him. He confronted Maria that evening. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, holding up the paper. Maria froze, tears streaming down her face. "I was scared, David. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to lose you."
"Lose me?" David shouted, his voice shaking with anger. "You've already put me at risk. What kind of person does that?"
Maria broke down, begging for forgiveness, but David couldn't look at her. He felt betrayed, angry, and trapped. Over the next few weeks, he went to the doctor and discovered he had also contracted the virus. David's love for Maria turned into bitterness. He felt like she had destroyed his life, and he wanted her to feel the same pain. But instead of confronting her again, he came up with a plan to hurt her in the worst way possible. He started plotting his revenge, determined to make Maria suffer in the worst way imaginable. David began paying more attention to Lena. At first, it seemed harmless, helping her with homework, taking her out for ice cream, but soon his actions crossed a line. He started visiting Lena's room late at night, whispering things that made her uncomfortable. He said to Lena, "Has anyone told you how pretty you are? Let me show you what it means to be a woman. Has a boy touched your private part before?" "No," she answered. "Remove your clothes and lay on the bed. I want to check if you are telling the truth." The little girl was confused and scared. She did not know what he meant and what he had in mind for her, but she trusted him and removed her clothes, just as he had instructed. After all, he was her supposed father. She laid on the bed naked and sprayed her legs for her stepfather to check. He began having intimacy with her. She screamed out of pain as he inserted his manhood inside her private part. "Daddy, it is too big. It hurts, Daddy. I cannot bear the pain. Let me go. What are you doing? Let me go." Lena struggled and cried to him. She didn't know how to stop him, and she eventually passed out. David, after having his way with her, laid beside her till she regained consciousness. David told her, "This is our secret. If you tell anyone, it will destroy your family, and your mother will never be happy with you, and she will hate you for the rest of your life." Lena felt trapped, just like David wanted her to. At first, Lena didn't know how to process what David had done to her. She tried to avoid him, locking her door at night and staying late at school whenever she could. But David always found a way to corner her when Maria wasn't around. His once kind words now made her feel small and powerless. Lena wanted to tell her mother, but a voice in her head kept saying, "She won't believe you, she'll blame you." Her grades started slipping, and her laughter faded. Her best friend, Grace, noticed. One afternoon at school, Grace pulled her aside. "Lena, what's wrong? You've been acting different lately." Lena shook her head. "Nothing, I'm fine." But Grace wasn't convinced. "You can tell me. I'm your best friend." Lena hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes. Finally, she whispered, "It's David. He's been coming into my room at night. I don't know what to do." Grace was shocked. "Lena, you have to tell someone."
I can't, Lena cried. He said it would ruin everything, and my mum, she's so happy with him. She'll hate me if I tell her.
Grace hugged her tightly. "Your mom loves you, Lena. You don't deserve this. I'm going to help you." That evening, Grace went home and told her own mother what Lena had confided. Grace's mum, shocked and furious, immediately called Maria. "Maria, I need to talk to you," she said urgently. "It's about Lena." Maria, confused, asked, "What is it? Is she okay?" Grace's mom hesitated, then said, "Lena told Grace that David has been hurting her. Maria, you need to talk to her." Maria's heart sank. She felt like the room was spinning. "That can't be true," she whispered. Maria couldn't believe it at first. She shouted, "David would never do something like that. He loves Lena." "David loves us." But Amy's mum told her to ask Lena and take her to the doctor. But doubt crept into her mind. She hung up the phone and went straight to Lena's room. "Lena," she said gently, sitting on the bed, "I need you to tell me the truth. Has David done something to hurt you?" Lena froze, tears streaming down her face. Slowly, she nodded. Maria's world shattered. At first, she didn't want to believe it. She yelled, "How could you let this happen? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Lena sobbed, "I was scared, Mom. He said it would ruin everything." Maria felt a wave of guilt and anger. She wanted to scream at David, but another thought stopped her cold. "This is all my fault. I brought him into our lives. I brought the infection into this home. What will people say when they find out the truth? That I caused all of this? That I destroyed my own family?" Lena, sitting silently at the dining table, finally speaks. "Mom, what are we going to do? Are we going to the police?" Maria turns sharply, her guilt transforming into misplaced anger. "The police? Do you know what that would mean? Everyone will know our business. They'll know I brought this into our home." "But Mom, he hurt me. Maria cuts her off, her voice trembling.
Why didn't you stop him, Lena? Why didn't you tell me earlier? How could you let this happen?
Lena stares at her mother in disbelief, tears streaming down her face.
Let this happen. Mom, he's your husband. I didn't know what to do. I was scared.
Maria's voice rises, laced with bitterness and self-loathing. "You're 10 years old, Lena. You should have known better. You should have said no."
Lena, devastated, runs to her room and slams the door. Maria collapses onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. She feels trapped between her guilt and her responsibility to protect her daughter.
For days, Maria wrestled with what to do. She knew the right thing was to go to the police, but fear paralyzed her. What would people say when they found out she was promiscuous and had infected David? How could she face the shame of the truth? But every time she looked at Lena's tear-streaked face, she knew she couldn't stay silent. Finally, she took Lena to the clinic for a test. When the results came back, Maria's worst fear was confirmed. Lena was HIV positive. Something snapped inside Maria. All the guilt and fear turned into anger, not at herself, but at David. He had taken advantage of her daughter, and she couldn't let him get away with it. With trembling hands, Maria called the police. "My husband hurt my daughter," she said, her voice breaking. "I want him arrested." Maria sat at the edge of her bed, gripping the phone tightly after calling the police. Her heart raced, her hands trembling, but she knew she couldn't back out now. She had failed Lena before, but this time she was determined to protect her. That evening, David came home as if nothing was wrong. He smiled at Maria and said, "Dinner smells great." But Maria couldn't even look at him.
David, she said, her voice cold, we need to talk.
David noticed the tension in the room. "What's wrong?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Maria stood up, her fists clenched. "Lena told me everything." David froze, his face draining of color. I I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered.
Don't lie to me, Maria screamed, her voice shaking with rage. You hurt my daughter. How could you, after everything I've done for you?
David's expression shifted from shock to defiance. You brought this on yourself, Maria, he snapped. You infected me and I—
Enough! Maria interrupted, tears streaming down her face. How dare you blame me for your evil? Lena is a child. She trusted you.
Before David could respond, there was a loud knock at the door. The police had arrived. Maria stepped aside as two officers entered the house. David Thompson, one officer said firmly, you're under arrest for sexual assault and endangering the welfare of a minor. David's face twisted in anger. Maria, you can't do this to me, he shouted as the officers handcuffed him. But Maria didn't flinch. She stood tall, her arms around Lena, who had come out of her room, trembling but relieved. You did this to yourself, David, Maria said quietly, and now you'll face the consequences. After David was taken away, Maria collapsed into a chair, her strength drained. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The police would investigate, and the community would inevitably talk. But none of that mattered compared to Lena's safety. The next day, Maria sat down with Lena. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, she said, tears in her eyes. I should have protected you. I should have seen the signs. Lena hugged her tightly. It's not your fault, Mom, she whispered. You believed he was a good man just like I did. Maria nodded, but the guilt lingered. She vowed to do everything she could to rebuild their lives and help Lena heal. Weeks turned into months. David's trial began. In the courtroom, he showed no remorse. She ruined my life. She gave me this virus. I just wanted her to feel what I felt. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Maria testified bravely, sharing the truth of what happened despite the pain it caused. David was convicted and sentenced to prison. Maria joined a support group for women and families affected by abuse and HIV. Through the group, she found strength and a sense of community. She also worked tirelessly to support Lena, encouraging her to dream big despite their struggles. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Lena said, Mom, do you think things will ever be normal again? Maria smiled softly. I don't know if we'll ever go back to how things were, Lena. But I know one thing, we're stronger now. And no matter what happens, we'll face it together. My choices brought pain, but they also brought lessons. Thank you for watching this story. It's not just a story, it's a reflection of the struggles, mistakes, and redemption that many people experience in life. If this story resonated with you, I urge you to share your thoughts and lessons in the comments below. What did you learn from Maria's journey? How would you have handled the situation? Your insights could inspire someone else who might be facing a similar challenge. And remember, you're not alone. There are people out there who understand your struggles and are willing to listen. Sharing your story could be a source of relief, not just for you, but for others who feel isolated in their pain. If you have a personal story or know someone whose story could teach or inspire others, I'd love to help share it. You can reach out to me directly through my email, which you'll find in the description box below. Together, we can turn real-life experiences into lessons that empower and uplift. Let's create a community of support and understanding. I look forward to hearing from you.